Yes.
So the rich man asks, what do I need to do to be a good person? The first thing Jesus says before, give all your money away, is follow all the commandments.
Yes.
Yet after the death of Jesus, Christians taught that, well, you don't have to follow the commandments because Jesus' death saved you from that.
This is not true.
So, yeah.
This is not true. What are the commandments that Jesus meant? Again, did he mean 613 commandments, which Maimonides recognizes? Which, by the way, would include exterminating Amalek. Probably not, because Jesus clearly rejects, this is textually established, rejects the commandment of giving your wife a letter of divorce, which is one of 613 commandments, according to Maimonides. Right? So he clearly views the law differently from a rabbinical view. There is just no question about it. So he gives examples of the commandments, and the examples come from the Decalogue, which Christians never abolished. It's the dietary laws. It's the laws about cooking the kid in his mother's milk, which Christians said that do not apply. At least not, we will see the situation is much trickier than you make it be. They were not...
The kid in his mother's milk is in the Bible.
Is in the Bible. It is in the Bible.
It's in the Mishnah and Gomorrah, isn't it?
No, it's in the Bible.
It is in the Bible. It's directly in multiple places, 3 places. So this is one of the commandments which is clearly very serious since it appears in multiple places. But the entire we shall see the next lecture, how the keeping the law was addressed by early Christians. It's not as simple as you do not have to keep the law. The death of Jesus Christ removes that. But what I'm trying to say that it's very clear from the attitude of Jesus Christ, and this is why, by the way, he was hated by the rabbinical authorities, was that he did not accept rabbinical Judaism as normative. Right? By the way, he was not the only person. At that time, the decision, which way the Judaism would go, has been made. Talmud has been written. And it's literally the decision at the end of the 1st century, after the destruction of Jerusalem, of putting the wall around the Torah, creating the Talmud, and fundamental rejection of Christianity, which became in some sense, one of the central points of rabbinical Judaism becomes that Christianity is false. You cannot, you have every day to basically say a prayer which says that these are evil people. And that becomes the part of the rabbinical Judaism. It was not, during Jesus' time, it wasn't yet defined. It was still discussed. Right? After all, there were Sadducees, there were high priestly party which ignored all these rabbinical things. Right? They were in power. Caiaphas was not a Hasidim. He was not. They had Hasidim back then too. Right? So it's a, we will have to look at this relation to the law. But fundamentally, Christianity maintains absolutely the 10 Commandments, the core of the law, stands. They're absolute, by the way. Rabbinical Judaism does not recognize 10 Commandments as a universal significance, meaning thou shalt not kill does not mean thou shalt not kill a human being. It means thou shalt not kill a Jew. Thou shalt not murder, whatever, a Jew. Right? Christianity takes it as a universal commandment. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill, has been used as the translation for centuries. So permit me stick to it. Thou shalt not kill has a universal significance, not explainable. You couldn't say, well, but they're not people. Everybody is a person. So certain commandments become absolutely central. Certain commandments do not become central because in many respects, as we'll discuss next time, they were never meant as universal. However, whatever context you take, it's pretty clear that dietary law did not apply to the Gentiles, goyim. Right. So, yes?
A question about the poverty conception. So, poverty. So, was it stated that poverty by itself was good, or it was stated that being rich was bad, or the way to be rich was bad for both?
The question is, was poverty good? Absolutely. Okay, there are multiple interpretations, but here I will give you mine. And it's not particularly a regional one. Yes, I think it was meant that poverty is absolute good. It's good. Okay? As St. Francis of Assisi will say, we'll encounter him later, is that, we have to follow Lady Poverty. For him, she becomes this a great, great figure. It's something precious. Right? And there is something truly disgusting about mammon. You cannot, as Jesus says, this is direct quote, you cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot love money. And as Paul interprets, the love of money is the root of all evil, not some, all. You say, he's overboard. I'm reporting what is, right? You don't, obviously most people do not accept it.
At this point, that roughly money is bad and the way to money.
The love of money.
Love of money and the way to money, right? It's like whatever you do to get money. Present point is the poverty is good by itself.
Yes, it is good by itself. That is the point there. The point is, the point, again, you could say, well, I disagree. And you would be in absolute majority. But what Jesus actually says, blessed are you the poor. Right? This is so unambiguous. And he keeps repeating, this is not a random quote. It's everywhere. And it's Boris and then this Boris. And then you. And then, first this Boris.
Oh, I just want to make a kind of, to put it in the context, it was, all things seem to happen when Judea was again under occupation, and the wealthy people were those who actually collaborate mostly with Romans. At the time, they were pretty much hated. And the rest of the country were censored for the sake of levy collection and actually wiped and perished. So, this is a context which is very close to the heart of the slaves all over the empire, which is not kind of, we are missing this kind of point that I think that most of the people who actually accepted initially this.
That's what Marxism teaches you. What it says that it was slave religion. Well, it's wonderful theory, except you have to look at the facts. I know facts are these terrible things. We know many early Christians. Okay, what do we know about them? We know that, for example, the names which we have in the New Testament, a couple, the most famous probably Christian couple, is Prisca and Aquila. They were prosperous tent makers. Right? They had a business. They were selling tents. They were not slaves. Right? Many of them were citizens. Okay? When we get to first Christian writers, sort of the first significant Christian writer is Justin the Martyr. He was a philosopher, a trained philosopher, teacher of philosophy. He was not a slave. Were there slaves? Probably. There are clearly one letter. What we see in the New Testament, again, I urge you to read the texts. What we see, do you remember the letter of James with its violent attack on the rich, which is read? Okay, how does it start? It starts addressing Christians, saying, look at you guys. If a rich guy comes to your congregation, you all fawn over him. You give him the seat of honor. That's really unacceptable. By the way, what is the important message there? That's how it was. Obviously, Christians were human. They were fawning. I mean, till today, if Chuck Geschke, a famous Catholic, sort of goes someplace, bishops bow. Chuck Geschke is the founder of Adobe and indeed a rich person. Right? People bow. If somebody less important from Mexico without citizenship comes, they do not bow. They do not put them at the same table. They don't feed them the same filet mignon. It's now, and it is in the early church. It's the same thing. By the way, I did not tell you that Christians were doing things Jesus told them. I never did say that. I mean, it's very clear throughout history that Christians do everything in their power to first explain these things away. They say, no, he couldn't possibly mean really being poor. He means being poor in spirit. By the way, that's how Matthew presents it. So as long as you're poor in spirit, you don't have to give up the money. Or they say, there are very important, as long as Chuck Geschke gives 1/10 or 1% of his money to the bishop, we will make him a papal knight. And they did, of course. Right? So when you look, there is a very consistent, and you say, and by the way, did Christians were really chaste? Well, I don't know. Paul writes, when he writes to Corinthians, he says, you do things pagans do not do. You have this guy who sleeps with his adopted mother. That's a really bad thing to do. So Christians did do things. Right? Early Christians, middle Christians, late Christians. Popes did things. Some. There were worse periods than Borgia, than Alexander VI. He was a terrible man, but there was a period in the history of the church, specifically the 10th century, which was known by church historians as pornocratia. Do I have to translate? Not pornographia, pornocratia. There were a bunch of sort of loose women who controlled the See of Peter, appointing their lovers, their sons, their whatever, to be bishops of Rome. Was it particularly Christian? No, absolutely not. But right now I'm not discussing I have 15 more lectures to tell you what Christians have been doing since the time of Jesus Christ. But again, I urge what you present is official Marxist point of view. I do not believe there is historical evidence that it was a slave religion.
oppressed people, slave included.
Again,
Oppressed means
one thing I recommend, again, reading the sources. What you will see, for example, that the sources requires an advanced level of literacy, right? Which you still don't, I mean, I claim that most people of today with university education, even with advanced university degrees, will have difficulty comprehending, say, Letter to the Romans by Paul, a remarkably advanced theological text, which available, I mean, you guys could take a look. It's complicated. So what we see is the original documents are actually much more sophisticated than one would encounter for centuries to come. So it's not as simple. I have to go to the next question.
Yeah, you kind of anticipated my question a little bit. So I think there is an expression in the Sermon on the Mount which is a source of, well, at least confusion inside me, okay, which is blessed are the poor in spirit. So I would love to hear your take. What is poor in spirit? What does it exactly mean?
Okay, so what the question is why Luke says, blessed are you the poor, while Matthew says, blessed are poor in spirit. Let me tell you my take on that. One thing which it's clearly appears in Matthew is that he somewhat mellows the attack on the rich. He doesn't quite drop it. He cannot. And he wants to preserve the thing, but he mellows it. Sort of many modern scholars believe that his congregation, which is most likely from Antioch, was well-to-do guys. So if you preach to the well-to-do guys, you sort of say, well, I mean, what it means is that as long as you're spiritually not attached to the money, you don't have to give it away. That's not what Jesus says. Even in Matthew, sort of, he's not, but he mellows the thing. He spiritualizes again. When you look, if you compare, it's in the 5th chapter of Matthew, if you compare the sort of the way the Beatitudes, blessed, are presented in Matthew and in Luke, Matthew spiritualizes them. Fortunately, we have multiple sources, right? So I chose to present the Gospel of Luke because I actually claim it's more likely to go, I mean, it's really totally socially unacceptable. Therefore, that's what probably Jesus said. But in some sense, it's very simple. I mean, the Christians for 2,000 years are trying to explain Jesus away.
Purely by accident, my question is essentially a follow-up to that, which is under the modern welfare state, and so maybe not the U.S. if you reject the U.S. being a modern welfare state.
I do.
Scandinavia or Canada.
Yes.
Is essentially everyone evil under this sufficiently materially comfortable standard?
I don't think that if you go to Scandinavia, you would find that everybody is rich.
Almost. Well, I mean, that's why I'm saying, is it a?
I don't think that in reality there is that. Your question is deeper than it might appear. I suspect it's intended as a deeper question. Yes, being well-fed effectively makes a person non-spiritual. I'm very well-fed. So there is a contradiction between spirituality and abundance of filet mignon. I think it's just so. I'm not saying they're evil people, but I hope that humanity could find a path which well, will take care of each other without making everybody a steak-eating machine. Yes? It's not, I mean, yes, we're overfed. This is pretty clear. And, you know, we concentrate on very non-spiritual things. This is a fact, you know, whether here or in Denmark. You know, one of my closest friends is a Dane and a wonderful person, but I wish he would eat less steak. I mean, he watches this, so he will hear it. Oliver, you know, and again, when you look at me, I don't look spiritually advanced. Maybe I am, but, you know, there is this evidence right here. So it's hard. You know, I'm not, by the way, I never said that it's easy or, you know, actually what I said very, very directly, it's impossible. And for 2,000 years, Christians were trying not to follow Jesus very effectively. You know, sometimes it appears to me that Christianity hasn't been tried, or at least after the Constantine, it sort of becomes really hard to. Yes?
Speaking of Christianity hasn't been tried, so if I remember my Deeds of the Apostles well...
Acts.
Acts, sorry, yeah, well, Russian. Acts of the Apostles well, so Apostle Peter, after he was kind of running his congregation, he established rather communist.
Totally communist.
Totally communist and like rather cruel. Okay, he killed people for not.
He didn't kill.
Well, they died, right? There was this couple.
They died.
Tried
to cheat.
To cheat, yes. So they died.
Punished by God, yes.
Oh, by God, yes, of course, not by Peter, yeah, sure.
No, I mean, this is what described. You might not believe it, but what was described as an act.
No, I'm trying to remember.
Yes. But immediately, I mean, obviously in the beginning.
This was following Jesus?
Yeah, they thought it was following Jesus.
Well, how you think? I mean, it's...
Well, I mean,
they knew
it's...
Jesus much better than you do.
Yes, they knew Jesus much better than I do, and there are multiple statements in Acts of the Apostles. Let us literally let us do a very simple thing. Sort of look at what it says. In multiple occasions, it says that they have everything in common. This means communism. Once upon a time, Paul and I have a friend, Barbarians, who is an old libertarian, and who was always explaining to me that Christianity was sort of libertarian religion. Eventually, I said, that was around Christmas. I said, Bob, why don't you read, and I challenge all of you to do the same, Gospel of Luke, followed by Acts of the Apostles, because these are two parts of the same book. They're both written by Luke, and mark all the passages which talk about riches and whatever. Figure out. And he's a thorough guy. He read it. It's about 60 pages. I know it's hard for a modern man to read 60 pages, but he somehow he did. And he calls me up and says, yeah, they were communists. So,
Renounced the religion.
oh, no, he was an atheist before and remained an atheist, but he thought that he had Christians on his side. You know, he was not the only one. I mean, there's a large American party, you might have heard of them, which believes that. So, let us look at what Acts of the Apostles tell us about how and all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. I think it's a very, very clear statement.
This is a Peter,
This is Peter.
description of Peter.
No, it's the description of early Christian community, everyone. Right? So that's what it says. Sounds very communistic. What?
The government isn't involved. That's the key aspect of Marxism.
I don't know. I'm not a Marxist. Neither was Peter. What? The term communism predates Marxists.
Yes.
When people say communist today, they mean Marxist.
Not me. Okay? There were people, there was this religion which clearly at its central text, this is New Testament, claimed the community of property. Yes, voluntary community. Yes, not enforced by governments. So you could do whatever, you don't have to join. But if you want to be perfect. Right? So, I'm just quoting the texts. This is, in many respects, one thing is that we have to get to the point where we sort of say Christianity means that, except of what Ted Cruz says.
Ironically, that was implemented by the Jews, kibbutzes.
There were many wonderful things about early Israel which I utterly admire. Yes, for the record, I think that many things which Israeli founding fathers were doing, not all, but very many, were very, very good. And up to a certain point, I thought of Israel as literally sort of bright hope for humanity. It's hard to be a bright hope for humanity, So, but I guess that's how it looks. But what I'm saying is there were very many things in early Israeli history which I find utterly admirable. Not just kibbutz, I mean the universal military service, I mean the willingness to die for your country. These people were actually fighting for their country. They were not just pushing buttons and somebody dies far away. They were fighting. They were, again, we could argue some problems about, things, but there was something truly great in early Israel. Yes, they're recording, so for the record, but I think that it's hard to, they lasted longer than they could, from the point of view of sort of aspiring to certain greatness. But no, they're just human. No more questions? Okay. Thank you, guys.